evening, everyone, and welcome to the session on Bridging the Gap, Youth Aspirations and Market Opportunities. Home to the largest share of world's youth population, with 48% of its population below the age of 24 years, South Asia has the potential to drive its economies to be more vibrant and productive. While more young people are entering the labor market with higher levels of education than in the past, many continue to be unemployed or underemployed. This reveals a critical gap between youth aspirations and market opportunities. Against the background of this global phenomenon, the 2018 UN General Assembly, Generation Unlimited was launched. As a multi-stakeholder platform, Generation Unlimited works with young people, the private sector, governments, academics, and the UN ecosystem to co-create solutions that bridge the gaps. In 2019, two Asian countries were pioneering Generation Unlimited, Bangladesh and India. This session will focus on how the dialogue between young people, private sector, and government is now starting to co-create solutions at scale for young people. We have three exciting panelists with us today to discuss this topic and share with us their thoughts. Neil is the founding advisory board member of Yuva Generation Unlimited in India and has been supporting a lot of the work around strategy for digital access, engaging young people as change makers, and other key areas that Yuva is focused on. Neil is a managing partner of PwC India, and he is also the government sector lead at PwC India, along with being the global leader of the Digital Government Network. Neil has worked on various large transformative programs in over 20 countries and regions, including UK, Middle East, Africa, Caribbean, and Southeast Asia. He is particularly passionate about improving citizens' experience with government and how technology can be leveraged for meeting the sustainable development goals and improving the quality of life for the citizen. He is a distinguished member of the technical committees on telecommunications, ICT standards, e-government services, Government of India's National Advisory Board on Information Security, NASSCOM, e-Business Task Force, Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, National Committee on Information Technology and E-Commerce, Editorial Advisory Board, and CIO Magazine. Our second panelist, equally distinguished, is Mr. Assad Zaman. He has worked with A2I since 2010. Currently, he is leading the Future of Work Lab at A2I as a policy specialist. He plays a significant role in reshaping skills development through appropriate planning, monitoring, coordination, and policy formulation. He established partnerships with various national and international organizations and development partners to create the necessary linkages among government skills development agencies and job providers to pave the way for young people and workers to receive effective skills and gain employment and entrepreneurship. He has worked on national intelligence for skills, employment, and entrepreneurship and is providing strategic guidance for Generation Unlimited in Bangladesh. He is responsible for the South to South Triangular Cooperation, and he is also the person for South to South Network for Public Service Innovations as well. He coordinates more than 30 plus countries around these partnerships and also looking at the best practices and sharing these from one country to another. He has graduated from University of Dhaka in psychology and education psychology and masters in development studies as well. And he has also worked with the Swedish International Development Corporation. And finally, our young person, Chivang Singh Chauhan, who co-founded and currently serves as the Executive Vice President of Project Statecraft, which is a youth policy think tank. He believes in incentivizing and enabling youth to enter the public policy and international relations spaces to enhance the standard of decision making to actively address the needs of today. According to him, the market has been inflated by rigid mentality and policies which haven't been changed to accommodate the sheer volume of incoming youth. Fostering youth voices from varying regions, fields, and walks of life is crucial to empowering young people as well as innovating solutions that include vulnerable populations in the best possible method to combat this. As a member of Yuva's Young People's Action Team, Shivank is providing valuable youth perspective and also his opportunities and co-creation and dialogue with all of us. I am Dwarka Sriram. I'm the Chief of Adolescent Development and Generation Unlimited in India and have been working with contextualizing Generation Unlimited in India through an initiative called Yuva. So let me start with the first set of questions for the panelists. I'll start with Assad. We know government of Bangladesh is looking at a higher investments in skilling and A2I in itself. Within the government is driving a lot of linkages of stakeholders. Do you see any gaps that demonstrate lower participation from young people, such as low sign-ups from them and less of them taking up jobs? What are the trends in Bangladesh? Could you please share your thoughts with us?
Thank you, colleague. Actually, Bangladesh has an 82 million labor force with a growth of 2.2%, which means every year 2 million new labor force includes in the workforce. The total youth population between the ages of 15 to 29 is 42 million, and current youth unemployment rate is actually 12%. So in Bangladesh, there are 23 ministries who are involved in skill development, employment generation, and entrepreneurship creation. There are about 13,000 plus public-private training service providers who provide skills for 1.7 million young people every year. But we see there is gap between the supply and demand side. The skilled workforce created by the training service providers are not always fulfilling the demand of the industries. To fulfill the gaps, a lot of steps have been taken by the government, including A2I, where further investments are required. Firstly, the National Intelligence for Skills, Education, Employment, and Entrepreneurship (NICE) platform have been developed for ensuring real-time data between the supply and demand side. Secondly, A2I is doing continuous market study to take the demand from the industries and prepare the public-private training service providers as per the demand. Thirdly, to tackle the challenge of fourth industrial revolution, a lot of initiatives related to future skills have been taken in Bangladesh as pilot. And fifthly, Generation Unlimited in Bangladesh has set a target to skill 17 million youth by 2024. I think we can learn from other countries, and at the same time, we can share our best practices with other southern countries to tackle the common challenges through South-South cooperation. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Assad. I think it's a very important point that you're sharing with us in terms of learnings from, especially through the South to South corporations. Neil, I think you have been working closely on many government initiatives in India and globally as well. And you have been an advisory board member and been also working very closely with YUVA, which is Generation Unlimited in India. What, according to you, are some of the key challenges and opportunities for skilling, jobs, and entrepreneurship? And what is the response of young people to these initiatives? Could you share with us your thoughts on this?
Well, thanks a lot, Dwarka. I think these are a very pertinent question you put up. And just building on what Assad said earlier as well, I'd like to answer this in five points, really. I think the first one, there are often gaps between this being skilled and being employable. Which is, I think, which may keep widening as the jobs of the future keep coming up, newer requirements, newer skills in the future keeps coming up. The real risk that this gap will keep widening. The answer there is to develop systems at scale. And you know my passion for technology and technology at scale, which can help address this issue of being skilled and being employable on a real-time basis. And by rather than waiting for a policy cycle for intervention. Typically, I think there's a long policy cycle in deciding which areas do we skill in, and there's a larger implementation cycle for that. I think platforms of scale can help bridge this time gap to identify the skilling requirements on a real-time basis. I think the second I would say again is the need to create interoperable systems across the multitudes of platforms which is focused to the personalized needs and aspirations of the youth. Today, I think in most countries, there are plethora of systems available. I definitely talk of India and many other larger countries. Every state, every department all of them are coming out with initiatives, the private sector, the NG, the civil society, in terms of what they can do. And they at times get lost in that as to where to skill, where to, and thereafter, how do I become employable really? So I think mechanisms where we can create interoperability, interlinkages across so that whichever platform I went to, I could get the benefit of all. So for I think if and the big mindset shift required there is all of the, whether it is civil society or any particular federal department or a state government, everybody is looking at their mandate and of not necessarily keeping the youth at the center. The moment we start to do that, I think this will start to change. I think the third one, of course, is the right blend of physical and digital, the phygital part to help bridge the education and skilling needs for youth. I think technology can play a very, very, very key role in terms of identifying, in terms of bridging any information asymmetry. But I think some of the deliveries will have to get far more physical as well, so as to deal with that issue. I think the fourth point I'd like to say is that, again, the digital channels which can help overcome the inherent inequalities in search of economic opportunities. I think, how do we, yes, I think the challenge of access remains, but which could be addressed separately. The challenge of access is probably less difficult to surmount than the challenge of information itself. There's no way to find out availability of a skill or a job across plethora of providers unless there is kind of without using technology in some way. And I think youth, especially from the last point, would be from rural, remote, and tribal areas, face this challenge of access to quality information, skilling content, and resources as they progress from school education to higher or technical or vocational education, and which is probably the biggest challenge in them securing high quality jobs. I think this interlinkage of social development and the potential economic well-being of individuals, this should not be ignored and this should be focused on. Probably longer answer. I think these are the 5 points in my experience I've seen as really crucial to solve this challenge for the youth, which is such an important one.
Thanks, Dale. I think you raised very valid points. And for us, to look at that transition and how can we support it for a young girl or a young boy from childhood to adulthood or from school to work, depending on where they're at a point in time, it's very important. They have shared their aspirations, but they have also shared their challenges in terms of how do you access this information, and you really highlighted those points. But linked to your second one in terms of listening to young people's voices and understanding from them as well, I would like to now move on to Shivank. You and your friends have founded Project Statecraft. Can you tell us what inspired you to all do this? And so just to focus on how you have looked at youth-based advocacy, about understanding the voices of theirs and the need for an active role. Could you share your thoughts on how your journey has been and also that of Project Craft?
Of course. It's a rather long story, and I'll try to condense it as best as I can.
Sure.
I got pulled into public policy because of a senior of mine. So while he recently got commissioned into the Indian Air Force, his words to me regarding making a career out of things that we generally enjoyed spoke to Abhishek and me, as did his advice regarding public policy. Of course, this led to us both working on research and policy pieces on several issues. Now, in the course of said research and the bid to get it published, we realized two things. The first, that the vast majority of think tanks or political organizations that dealt in the fields of public policy or advocacy had little to no youth representation in terms of employees, but also in terms of policies representing the youth. And the second, that there was not a single organization whose executive or leadership was under the age of 40. Now, there's generally a good reason for the latter. Like conventional wisdom states that with age comes wisdom, And that experience is crucial in guiding said organizations in traditionally adult fields. Now, this conventional wisdom, however, doesn't hold the same degree of relevance anymore. The youth is actively engaged in several fields, there is more knowledge than ever before, and that provides the youth with a platform to engage on the same level. The opportunities for said engagement on an equal footing, however, are curtailed by the two factors I just mentioned. And to fill this gap, we came up with the idea that led to the formation of Project Statecraft. Project Statecraft is a non-partisan youth-led policy think tank working in the field of global affairs and governance to produce truthful and equitable research. Now, we at Project Statecraft aim to build an ecosystem which would encourage the youth to carry out research and participate in deliberations and discussions in order to motivate and actually contrive change, right? So our primary goal at the onset was incentivizing and increasing this accessibility for entry into the policy space in terms of both the international relations and public policy. Now, this was achieved by actively enhancing the standard of decision making and by adding a youth perspective to a field that is dominated primarily by older adults entrenched in a certain way of thinking. And we believe we've been able to do that over the past few months, and we'll continue to do that in the future. A great example of this bid to educate and involve could be the parliamentary boot camp that we're holding over the course of February and March in the near future to aid people in understanding the goings on of the primary body of our country and something similar in the future as well.
Thank you, Shivank. I think it's fascinating to hear from three different perspectives, but very similar ideas as well in terms of how we need to listen to young people's voices, understand their needs and requirements, how we can bridge that gap by different stakeholders, including mainly the public and private sector. Based on what we have had heard so far from Shivang, but also many young people over the last couple of years in South Asia and globally, the disconnect between young people's aspirations and what is available as opportunities, and I think Neil, you alluded to a little bit on this as well, and the access is huge, especially now with the current COVID-19 crisis, the digital divide as we speak. So especially the South Asian countries, we also have the divide on gender, and this is something that's coming up as a huge gap. Now, this year, based on what you have shared with us so far, what will be your priorities to address these gaps, and what kind of partners and platforms do we need to bring on board to help bridge this gap? As we know, just each one of us by doing it alone cannot address it. So, what are your thoughts? And I would like to pose this question to all three of you. What are your thoughts on this? And maybe we'll start with Assad again and we go in the same order.
Thank you. Uh, Actually, A2I has been doing a lot of market studies and evidence-based surveys regarding the supply and demand side matches. And let me share a few initiatives. We did a domestic job market study to identify the job demand in economic zones. And based on the demand, now we are preparing our skill development agencies. Secondly, from Bangladesh every year, almost 1 million migrant workers actually they go abroad for international jobs. So we did a study in 53 countries to take the international job market demand in different occupations. Thirdly, thirdly, in Bangladesh there are many tourist places. So to develop that tourism-centered skill development, we did a study on 30 plus districts to identify the job demands in different occupations of tourism and hospitality sector. Fourth racial revolution is a challenge in Bangladesh, and to identify the to assess the impact of 4IR and identify the new job roles in the 4IR situation. We did a study in 5 sectors like agro-food, tourism, hospitality, furniture, leather goods and footwear, and ready-made garments. And based on the demand, now we are preparing our both public and private agencies. Also, we are also preparing ourselves for necessary policy guidance for next Bangladesh. Also during COVID, we did a study on 16 economic sectors to identify the job loss and emerging occupations, that means post-COVID skills. So we found that in 11 sectors there are massive job loss, and almost 20 million jobs are lost in 11 sectors. At the same time, new jobs have been created in different sectors like agro-food, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, ICT and e-commerce, and creative media. And we have found that from the study that every year, almost 4 million new jobs have been created in these sectors. So now we are repurposing our public-private skill development agencies based on on this demand. So A2I has developed a methodology. We call it 6D methodology to minimize the gap between supply and demand side. So first D, the demand from the industry, then demand supply matching through our online platform. We call it National Intelligence for Skills, Education, Employment, Entrepreneurship, NICE in short. And thirdly, we design then a curriculum by the relevant government agencies based on the market demand. And in the fourth stage, we ensure skill development. And in the fifth stage, we distribute certificate through job fair, and a certificate and an appointment letter for jobs through job fair, and finally decent employment. So most of the parts are done by online. Even during COVID time, we ensured skill development for the young generation through our online platform. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Assad. I think it's an interesting private-public sector model that you talked about based on understanding what the young people's requirements are. Neil, could you share with us your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'd like to put out three priorities in that context, which I'd like to work on in the year. First, I would say that how do we improve access to the to our youth in the most remote places? And kind of access would include device, would include connectivity, would include content, meaningful content. So I think that that's one big blob to work on. Because I think, and I'm continuing on the digital theme, what the pandemic showed us was that a huge amount more is possible using digital. But I think it also simultaneously showed us some of the challenges which we need to address very, very rapidly, especially to deal with the relatively underprivileged youth in the relatively more remote areas. I think that's one of the first most important point, access. Second, I would want to focus on kind of technology solutions for scale. And here, kind of, I'd want to just give an example we've been working on. I think some of you have heard of it, which is called Unnati. This is a platform being developed under the aegis of the Niti Aayog. And what it's attempting to do is, just to give a flavor, how do we create one platform of platforms which across all the job seekers, largely the blue and gray collared ones, and the focus to blue and gray collared came because there are hardly any good platforms that scale for them. Probably more than 200 million of them, where the demand and supply across multiple providers can be aggregated at a platform of platform levels. So, which is where I think it's an initiative, again, in a public-private mode, but being owned and governance being provided by the government at one level. So provides a level playing in an equitable field and the confidence for everybody to get together, all the workmen to get in, all the benefits which government can provide to get in there, and all the job and entrepreneurship opportunities to come in there. So something like that at scale can solve for that. The third important angle I'd like to work on is creating partnerships. And Yuva is a great example, and we've all been trying to work at creating partnerships of from civil society, government, private sector, technology providers, everybody. Because as I was mentioning earlier, to try and individually solve for this problem and going and attack the market, yes, we need that effort, but it needs to be really joined at the hips for the core.
Yeah.
And and I think that's really possible and feasible to be done. You has shown some good promise, some good initial success around that, and I think building on. But I think just building more and more of that, so that we moving from a culture of what have I done directly. I think in terms of how I've collaborated and made the whole ecosystem work. I think this would be the third big pillar for focus for me over the next 12 months or so. It's a longer journey, I know, but I think I need to carry out my task in what I can contribute to achieve in definable time zones. Back to you, Dwarka.
Thanks so much, Neil. I think there are three concrete things that you have said in terms of how we can, your priorities and how we can actually work together on that as well. Over to you, Shivank. We would like to see how we would look at your priorities and how we could also collaborate together.
Right. I think the disconnect in terms of opportunities that exists is also due to the limitations we set ourselves as a society by limiting ourselves to specific fields. And a common example of that in India could be that of engineering and medical fields being the only relevant ones according to popular perception. Now, with the sheer volume of youth and the limited number of opportunities, something that's only been exacerbated by COVID and subsequent downsizing, there are loads of people suffering, as verified by the statistics and studies that Mr. Zaman just spoke about. Now, in the short term, this could be rectified by greater governmental expenditure and short term employment schemes. But over the long term, and this is what's crucial, it needs to be about changing mindsets and improving access to other fields with respect to gaining the same amount of societal respect and credibility, and subsequently the broadening of these fields to provide more opportunities. Now, with respect to access, it's a different story. Access is denied due to a variety of reasons, be they gender, capital, or just social strata. For a positive change to improve the access to the youth, we need people creating organizations that fill in the gaps that the government leaves behind. Because to be very honest, at the end of the day, there is only so much that a government can do. This is where organizations created and led by fellow YPAT members, such as, say, Farhanas or Richas, is doing so much good with respect to the sections of society that need them the most. This is also, and I'm echoing Mr. Ratan here a bit, platforms like Yuva are very useful with them providing the interconnectivity between sister organizations, thereby enabling each one of them to work better in cohesion. I think more of the same is needed, in my opinion, and that is what we as a group should strive towards to form organic change.
Thanks, Shivank. And I think what you have shared kind of resonates with a lot of the audience today. And we have a question for you. As a young person, do you think aspirations of the young people that you represent can stay at the heart of the work and priorities that Assad and Neil talked about? So this is a question from the audience to you, Shivank.
I definitely think that those aspirations can stand with the values that they propose, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is fulfill both sides of the spectrum, right? We're trying to keep that youthful voice, but also simultaneously engaging on the things that actually matter in terms of the policy aspects. And we think that the best way forward would be to combine the two, right? So that is what the UVA is doing in terms of the YPAT. You have the YPAT, which is a youthful voice which talks about what the youth would want in terms of their aspirations, while simultaneously you have the secretariat and members such as you with immense amount of experience in the policy sector who are talking about the things that are feasible, the things that we should be doing, such as the ones that are talked about by Mr. Zaman and Mr. Ratan.
Thanks, Shivank. And I think it's an important point. And for me, the key takeaways, I have probably three key takeaways as well. It's about how we can come together, work together, and really co-create together with young people, with government, with private sector, with UN agencies, civil society organizations, from various partners. And I think one is that we need to have a better alignment on how we are investing on young people, but also how we are working with them. I think this is something that's kind of critical that's coming across from our conversations today. Second, I think is about really engaging with people, young people, and I think having Shivank here really shared those thoughts as well on how we can really solve problems at scale on issues that impact them. To really understand the voices from them, but also to actively work with them. And three, I think we really need to coordinate, and I think this is the point that Neil raised as well. We really need to bring in the government and the private sector to make investments more relevant and impactful based on what the young people are telling us. And I think these are the three critical takeaways from me from this session. And I would really like to thank Assad, Neil, and Shivank in terms of sharing your perspectives and at the right time as well. And I'm really happy to have all three of you on board to work with us on Generation Unlimited. So thank you again for your participation and sharing your thoughts and for our collaboration as we go together in 2021.
Thanks, Dwarka. I know there's a minute. I'd like to add a point to what Shivang said. I think I put out three priorities, I think, but after hearing Shivank, I want to add a fourth one to my list. I think instead of just stopping at kind of identifying and making the opportunities available to the youth, I think making the alternative careers, as he very rightly explained, more acceptable in the society. And I think that's a huge movement required.
Definitely.
So that's listening to the voice of the youth. I think that's a priority which I'd like to work upon coming up as well. And thanks, Shivang, for identifying it so beautifully for us.
This is an excellent platform of how we are listening to young people and seeing how the priorities change based on what they say. So thank you so much again, Shivank, Neil, and Assad. And thank you all for tuning in today to listen to this fascinating conversations. We'll keep you posted on how we collaborate and take it forward both in Bangladesh and in India.
Yeah, thanks to all the panelists and Dwarka for bringing out the nuances of multi-stakeholder dialogue within youth employability. I would like to thank our kind supporters for making this festival possible. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Sesame Workshop India, Rockefeller Foundation, COVID Action Collab, VNV Advisory Services, British Asia Trust, WPP India CSR Foundation, Catalyst Management Services, and Satwa. To continue chatting with your speakers and fellow delegates, please make full use of the messaging and meeting function of our festival platform. Do not forget to share your highlights on the session on the social media, and remember to tag us using the hashtag AVPN South Asia 2021 and hashtag social impact. Up next, we have a very interesting session on women FPOs and other approaches for strengthening rural livelihoods. We begin the session in a few seconds, and my colleague Kevin will take over from there. Thank you all, and please enjoy the rest of the festival.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. It was an amazing experience.
Thank you.